Hi, I just want to review with you some information that will help set the stage for our Fall Data Review Continuous Improvement Day coming up. Our learning targets today, or not today, but next week, are going to be to help us identify our academic and or behavior areas that are in need of support. So we're going to be analyzing our process and outcome data to help us identify areas that are going to need some additional support, using our process and outcome data to look at the impact that they are having on student achievement. So what processes do we have in place around literacy, behavior, and mathematics that impact our student outcomes, and what changes perhaps do we need to make to either of those areas. And then once we have our data analysis kind of done and on the kitchen table, so to speak, what are the priorities that we need to address first, and then a timeline for the other areas identified of need. So again, most of the data and the materials will either be applied paper copy or provided as paper copies to you, and or on our wiki or on a flash drive. So your PET swept and BSA, if your team completed those in the fall and or last spring, those will be provided to you. The materials will be on our implementers wiki, and the website is there. So our agenda for the upcoming days would be just a quick welcome, and then your team will be able to work as a team for almost all of the morning, working on data analysis and problem identification. And then just before lunch, we want to check in and see how you're doing with your celebrations and areas to grow. We do appreciate you sharing those with us at the ISD, because we are able then to share those with stakeholder groups like superintendents and curriculum directors, as well as coaches. And then your areas to grow help us at the ISD identify supports that we need to provide across the county. And then a lunch will be provided, and then you'll continue with team time, hoping by the afternoon you will have identified a problem and working on action planning around that problem. And then at 3:15 or so, we'll do another celebration in areas to grow, and then that session evaluation. And this is your day. You can work on math, you can work on literacy, you can work on behavior, whatever your team needs. Some of this work will have to be continued after the day, because it is a pretty lofty process, and so sometimes not all areas can be worked through that day. So the materials for the day look very similar to last year. You'll have your data toolkit, which has the school overview sheet in there, where you're looking for areas that you need to grow in your building self-assessment data, as well as your PET-R for reading and your PET-M for math, or your SWEPT for middle school literacy. And those are our process tools. Those are what systems do we have in place, and do we need to tweak any of those systems. The snapshots, again, that are aligned to each process tool, remember they list the area of the process tool, and then they give suggested action plan items should you need to grow any of the areas for our process data. And then moving across the sheet on the overview form, you'll be identifying or highlighting areas that you need to grow around your screening data for literacy and math, as well as looking at trends in your screening data for literacy and math. In our grades that have MEP assessment, you'll be looking at trends in your MEP assessment as well, and then any local assessment that you choose to bring, for example, your Reading Street data, your core math program data, or perception data that you collect within your local district as well. So once you kind of do that data analysis, you'll be moving into that problem solving piece. So you can see step 1 is gather and step 2 is study. And so those really, that's what your data toolkit will help set the stage for, and getting all of that kind of laid out on the kitchen table for us. And then you can see that step 3 is plan, and that's where you're going to get into your action plan. What are we going to do? What resources do we have to support, and what barriers perhaps are getting in the way of our student achievement? And then step 4 is that that's evaluating our plan, and some new information around that step from MDE that school districts will be engaging in, and I will explain that shortly. And so actually what I'm going to talk about next is what's new, and what is new is that MDE program evaluation tool. And that program evaluation tool is really going to help us look at, are we doing what we said we would do, and are we closing the achievement gaps for our subgroups. So this is the first year that MDE is requiring a program evaluation, and that is around your school improvement plan. And so what they would like schools to do, and districts to do as well, is pick an activity or a strategy that they want to evaluate this year on the effectiveness and use that information for future decision making. So I will talk about that in the next couple slides, just keeping in mind that it is a process that MDE is going to take you through. And what I'm going to share with you is just the requirement that is due this November for building teams. So each building is required to select either a strategy, a program, or an initiative that has the greatest impact on student achievement and closes the achievement gaps. So if you think about some examples, could be many of you have adopted a core reading program, so you might want to evaluate the effectiveness of that core reading, or a core math program. Some of you have implemented school-wide positive behavior supports, and you may want to look at our teaching expectations, getting us the benefits that we want and the results we want. Is our reward system working for us? Is our check and connect working for us? So those are some initiatives that you could choose to evaluate. You only have to pick one for this year. And so by November is when your team needs to go decide what strategy that you want to evaluate for this year. So it's nice that you have time at day-to-day to talk about that as a leadership team. You may not have the authority to go into your school improvement plan to make those changes, but at least you can begin to have that conversation and share it with leadership that has the ability to go in and make that notification. So this is, again, our continuous improvement process, and the MDE program evaluation tool that I just talked about really goes with the steps in the cycle. And the first one we're going to focus is on that the implementation of the plan, monitoring of the plan, and evaluating the plan. That's really the purpose of the program evaluation tool. It's the first year that MDE has required that of buildings and districts, and so really it's looking at those components of your system. So if you think about it this way, what are you doing now to implement, monitor, and evaluate your school or district plan? So sometimes what we hear quite a bit is we just do our school improvement plan as just a compliance issue. And we get that. What we want to try and do with the ISD here is educate staff and help them understand and make that a usable living document that guides your decision making. So I think the program evaluation tool will help us do that, because we need high quality evaluation, but in order to have that, you really have to plan for and be intentional about that. And so some of the questions that we need to ask ourselves are the right people doing the right things in the right way at the right time for the benefit of all of our students. I know when we come to day-to-days, there are wonderful conversations that happen, and then unfortunately we go back to school the next day and we just hit the ground running with things that we need to take care of immediately. And so sometimes we have great plans, but the implementation of the plan sometimes is areas that we need to grow. So this is just helping us stay accountable to ourselves. And so in order to stay accountable to ourselves, like I said earlier, we need to intentionally plan for the evaluation of that strategy or activity that we choose to monitor. And so when we think about the plan, we want to think about it in two ways. How are we going to monitor our adult behaviors? And so we might do that through fidelity protocols. For example, if you want to measure the effectiveness of phonics for reading, which is a reading intervention, there are protocols on how to deliver that intervention with fidelity. So you could do some observations of staff delivering that intervention. You could do staff surveys. We have our TLT project with walkthroughs, which will really give us some nice feedback. And it's that peer-to-peer feedback, which is really wonderful. And you could also do focus group interviews. So these are all just ideas of ways that you could monitor that adult behavior. But when you think of monitoring your strategy or activity, we want to think about not only what adult behaviors do we need to monitor, but also, more importantly, monitoring the effectiveness for our students. And so we'll have that baseline information, and then the PM 1, 2, 3, and 4 is progress monitoring, and that's that formative assessment. And it could be your Ames Web, it could be your Dibbles. Like I said, if you're choosing like a phonics for reading, some of our intervention programs have built-in fidelity checks that you want to use as well. And so how are we going to monitor student progress? Time and resources are a valuable commodity, and so we just want to make sure we're very efficient with that. So, and that being said, I think I've mentioned earlier, you will want to, your team, identify what strategy or activity that you're going to monitor using the MDE program evaluation tool. And that strategy or activity needs to be identified in Advanced Ed, the Assist platform, under Diagnostics and Surveys. So again, your team today could have that conversation about what initiative you want to monitor, and you might need to bring that back to your leadership as an idea, and they would probably be the ones to go in and update and modify within Advanced Ed. So if you don't have that capability, your role during the data days is to make a recommendation to your leadership about what activity or strategy based on your data you think would be a good one to monitor throughout the year. So the good news is we now have an evaluation tool to help us monitor, and also that the state is just requiring one strategy or an activity for this first year. So we will be around during data days again to provide that guided facilitation should need be around the program evaluation tool or any process or questions around the process or the problem solving guide. So after listening to the video, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me your questions, and we can have a short discussion on the morning of the data review day, or I can respond to your questions as well through email. So again, thank you for listening, and hopefully this will set the stage and kind of give you a framework for the data review days on Monday.